Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of the 2022 Rosalind Franklin Society year-end event from PhD to CEO. My name is Dr. Fay Lin, Senior Editor of Biotechnology, the new peer-reviewed journal that just launched this year in 2022, publishing outstanding research and perspectives across the biotechnology field. We're actively seeking original research submissions, and we offer fast and constructive peer review. You can learn more about our scope and guidelines at genbiotechjournal.com. Women remain underrepresented in leadership positions in the biotech industry. Today, we're joined by a few incredible women who have reached the C-suite to talk about their personal journey transitioning from academic research to industry, as well as gain insight into the specific challenges of being underrepresented in their fields. On our panel today, we have Dr. Iris Grossman, Chief Therapeutics Officer at 11 Therapeutics, a company that harnesses combinatorial chemistry and AI to transform RNA drug development into a programmable process, and Dr. Daisy Robinton, CEO and co-founder of Oviva Therapeutics, a company whose mission is to address the vast unmet need to women's health by driving research and clinical development targeting ovarian physiology. We're going to start our session today by letting our panelists introduce themselves and give us a glimpse into their journey. We'll then follow up with a Q&A. So I'm excited to talk to both of you, Iris and Daisy. So Iris, let's start with you. Can you say a few words about your background and current role at 11 Therapeutics?
Sure. And first, I'd like to thank the Society for inviting me to this talk. I think it's very important, and I share the mission behind this effort. So, trying not to take too long, but I've been very fortunate to have a pretty unpredictable journey. I started actually in med school. I've always, as a kid, thought of myself as becoming an MD, PhD, neurologist. Was very nerdy. Started med school, and it was also a research associate, but very quickly realized that physicians are limited by the tools at their disposal, particularly in the neurology field. And I felt that true impact on patients' lives actually resides at this or at that point in time. I'm not going to reveal my age just yet, but was more on developing new tools. And so I jumped into a direct PhD program into genetics. It was very, very early days. Actually, people thought I was nuts to think that genetics would have any direct implications to patients' lives. But I was very fortunate. My PhD was a collaboration between academia, industry, and government. It was in Israel, and actually two different academia. So it was a plethora of PIs, but a great experience to taste basically the different worlds and understand what it takes to write informed consent for patients in clinical trials and to develop a diagnostic and so on. So at the end of that period, instead of going back to med school and finishing the MD, I decided to stay in academia and do a postdoc. And so I had the opportunity to deepen my academic career, relationships, interests, but the personalized medicine theme was basically the main element in that period. And so it was very obvious to me, okay, academia is really not where I want to be in my heart. And I moved into industry, and basically in the next chapter, I spent time with and consulting for big pharma. Was with 4 of the world's largest big pharma. Most recently as head of early stage development or early stage clinical development for Teva Pharmaceuticals, the specialty side. And then from there, I jumped into the biotech world, moved into to Boston. So my career has also had multiple geographic relocations peppered in there. And so in the last 4.5 years, worked in biotech as chief science officer, and then worked with some of the VCs here in the world's biotech center. Got to experience a lot of the different roles or considerations that the different stakeholders take into account, as particularly in the realm of when platform companies develop pipelines and move on to nurture assets for, and particularly therapeutic assets, although I've worked with diagnostics as well. I also sit on several SABs. I'm very much, at my heart, I remain very much interested in this connection between genetics and biomarkers and digital markers as tools to better address patients' unmet needs. So I sit on several SABs that address these other aspects of drug development. And I'm also a member of several organizations like WIB, or Executive Women in Bio, where basically trying to give back to the community what I think I've been so fortunate to receive throughout my career, and all these turns and turbulations that helped me propel my career. It's been much thanks to incredible mentors, very open-minded, very much science and innovation driven individuals that were very focused on the goal and collaboration. And so I try to do the same these days, including being here today.
Great. Thanks so much, Iris. Daisy, I'm going to pass it to you. Can you give a summary of your journey and what led to the founding of Oviva Therapeutics?
Yes, thanks so much also for having me here. I'm really thrilled to be able to speak to you and to your audience about this. I think it's such an important topic. And I think a big piece that I'm sure we'll talk about today is just having more dialogue about this to show people what the path can be, or what a few different paths can be, because I think these days in particular, more nonlinear journeys are the ways that people, and women in particular, are finding ways to roles like those that we hold. So I'd love to share my story. I started in academia doing my PhD at Harvard University with George Daly, and I really had a vision of myself going on to be a professor and having my students and teaching, and I love teaching, and I really have a deep passion for science. And all of that was rooted in a desire to understand human biology, but also to help people. And I was too squeamish to go the MD route, so I probably also would have done the MD PhD path, but I'm a squeamish person, and so I didn't think I could handle the MD training once you get to residency. And so I decided to stick to science and really understand and unpack the various wonderful mysteries of biology and things that lead to disease, and hopefully with the aim of being able to translate that knowledge into therapeutics that can then help patients down the line. So during my PhD years, I found that I wasn't as enthralled as I wanted to be. I guess I'll say that. And I understood the fire of my passion, but it didn't feel like it was really being harnessed in that environment. So in the later years of my PhD, I started fairly aggressively just having conversations with people in different walks of the biosphere, different ways that people use their degree in bio, from law to science communication to biotech to VC to private equity, educators, all different kinds of things that I looked into just to better understand how I would be more engaged in the work I was doing and more excited to follow the passion that I had. And funnily enough, though many things were interesting to me, nothing really grabbed me. And I decided to stick with academia and pursue a postdoc, thinking that maybe a change in environment might unlock that passion that I knew was in there. So I did do a postdoc with Beth Stevens, also at Harvard, and the lab was amazing. The people were incredible. The science was just amazing, very interesting work. But I still felt like I was leaving something on the table. Like I wasn't quite, my heart wasn't in it in the way that I knew it could be. And so I took a leap of faith about a year or so after joining and just left. I had, by that point, partly through all of my networking and conversations that I'd had around different ways to use a PhD, I had enough of a network in place to do some freelance consulting and a bunch of project-based work that I could apply the degree I had and continue to explore ways that I could work in a realm touching science. And, that's maybe a story for another day, the types of things I did there. But ultimately, how I came to start Oviva was very serendipitous for a number of reasons. Partly I had left academia. I also got out of a long-term relationship around the same time, and I was 31. And I thought to myself, I know I want to have kids. I know that I should probably be thinking about family planning in some capacity, especially because I want to have a dynamic, amazing career. And I decided to go see a reproductive endocrinologist so that I could understand, how my biomarkers looked in terms of fertility and whether or not I needed to take any sort of action then versus, relaxing for a few years before I had to worry about, getting pregnant before my eggs atrophied and ovaries atrophied. So I had this meeting with a reproductive endocrinologist, and I was embarrassed to discover that despite having a PhD in human biology and translational medicine, I knew very little about my own reproductive health, about how the ovaries worked, about how our cycles worked, about the types of things that a woman should be considering if she's interested in having a family and 30 years old, or really, I think at any age. I just was really shocked at how little I knew. And that sent me down a rabbit hole of understanding more about women's health. And not just the whole fertility landscape, which thankfully for me, everything looked okay with the doctor appointment. I actually now have a 1-year-old daughter. And so that story is happy, but I continued down, I pulled the thread of women's health and reproductive health and how our bodies change over time and how our bodies uniquely age relative to men. And part of that is that our ovaries age at an accelerated rate relative to the rest of the other organs in the body. And so we all know that women go through menopause, but very few of us talk about it before we're either in it or beyond it. And I really just became enraged at my own naivete about it, but also our culture, the broader scientific community's oversight in terms of understanding female physiology and preparing women for what's happening, and also providing solutions for the symptoms and discomfort and challenges that women face throughout their journey in reproductive health and all of their health. And I think one of the key things that I learned are that the ovaries are really a critical part of our overall health and well-being. And so I'm learning all of this. I'm becoming enraged. I'm wanting to do something. I'm remembering anecdotes from my PhD of people saying, oh, you should only use male animals because the data will be cleaner. You won't have the cycles of the females to mess things up. And I just felt like we needed to do more. And around the same time, I happened to have a coffee with a friend of mine, a man named James Pyer, who's the CEO and founder of a company called Cambrian Biopharma, which is based in New York City. They're a longevity-focused biotech R&D company. And he was telling me all about Cambrian. He had just started it maybe a year before. And I said to James, I was like, man, like we go to these conferences and hear these panels and everyone's talking about longevity and health span and how to help people live healthier longer, but no one ever talks about the ovaries and the fact that they're the first organ to decline with age. And when they do, there's a whole constellation of negative health consequences that occur basically at midlife for women. More women are spending roughly a third of their life postmenopausally than ever before. And we just don't address this population at all. And we don't really have neither a good understanding nor good solutions for health issues that relate to reproductive health. And so through this conversation, James invited me to join Cambrian as a scientist in residence to explore this hypothesis that we can use the ovaries or look at the ovaries and try to address their decline in function as a means to improve health span in women. And for me, I wasn't sure whether this would lead to a company or what it would lead to, but it was an exciting opportunity to harness that passion that I had, like really a enraged fire of passion that I needed to point somewhere. It helped me point it and really just tackle what's a huge unmet need in not only biomedical science, but also our patient population. I joined around the time COVID hit. So the journey got a little bit sidetracked for a little while there. Many of us, ended up working on COVID related projects for a bit of time. But when I returned to the original hypothesis and premise of my role there as a scientist in residence, I quickly came across some incredible research out of MGH and Harvard with Dr. David Pepin and Dr. Pat Donahoe, looking at a naturally occurring hormone called AMH that helps modulate how the ovarian reserve declines over time. And I can go into more detail about, the actual premise of our company and how we're doing what we're doing. But suffice it to say, I found amazing science, incredible co-founders. We started working together to build the scientific plan, the research and development plan, the business plan for what Oviva could become, and founded our company with seed funding from Cambrian in, March of 2021. We secured 11.5 million of seed funding to start this company with the aim to improve health span in women through extending ovarian function. And, it's been almost 2 years now since I really began the work, and a year since Oviva's launch. And it's been going great. And I'm really thrilled to be able to speak to my journey and any way that I can help lay the path or reveal mysteries or be a supporter of other people and women who want to do things that might seem difficult or hard to figure out how to do. I'm really thrilled to be able to talk about that and serve in that way.
Thank you both for sharing those incredible stories. Now, in today's chat, I'm really excited to dive into two different facets here. So one, this panel is titled From PhD to CEO. For students interested in pursuing similar paths, how is it that you both got to those paths logistically, whether it be networking and various professional development opportunities that students can pursue? And then we also have this other facet of being a non-male in these spaces, the challenges related to those spaces, and unpacking some of the strategies and ways in which we can, as women, face these challenges and also be successful. And so why don't we start with a question on professional development? Now, Iris, you mentioned it sounded like your PhD program was collaborative as far as picking out facets of industry and government in addition to academia. It sounded like your program was a bit of a support on that end. Daisy, you mentioned aspects in regards to networking and talking to other people about how to advance your careers and really shift into the industry space. So if you both wanted to elaborate a bit more on what kind of advice would you give PhD students interested in making the jump from academia to industry? What should they be thinking about? And what are some tangible steps that they can do to position themselves to a potentially similar career?
Happy to take the first stab. So it's interesting. It's a question I'm asked a lot, and I try to gather kind of words of wisdom from my own career as well as my colleagues, friends, and people I'm trying to emulate. And I think one needs a healthy balance between being strategic and focused, and also being opportunistic. And I think it worked really well for me. I completely agree with Daisy that it's all, not all, but a real fundamental aspect of this is about networking, and constantly talking with people, not being shy about asking, so what was your journey? How did you learn about this opportunity? Back when I did made my choices, it was very non-traditional, and people, for a very long time, were quite surprised that I wouldn't first like start at MD, finish the whole 7 years, start a postdoc. I actually did a very short postdoc because, I was already figured out a way to realize my ultimate strategy, which was already, to go into the industry and make an impact there. And so I think that's, and then the last point I'll make on this aspect is, again, the mentorship. I've been very strategic about identifying a mentor at every step of my career, and I wasn't particularly concerned about the particular, the gender or even the necessarily the disease area. I wanted to work with somebody who I knew made a tremendous impact in an area that I was interested at the time. So, for instance, one of my greatest mentors was Alan Roses, who unfortunately is no longer with us. But he fought the industry for many, many years to acknowledge that ApoE4 is a factor in neurodegeneration and Alzheimer's. And today, or actually after he kind of was poo-pooed by many of his colleagues, today it's a known thing. Nobody would ever question the concept that ApoE4 is a major, driver of susceptibility to Alzheimer's disease. And so I was drawn to people who were bold to use science to make a difference in our world, and to use that knowledge to develop novel therapeutics. That was really kind of my the beacon I was trying to follow. And it is, I find that having a mentor that helps you through these difficult times and that believes in you, but also kind of kicks you in the behind when you're not being rigorous enough, or you're not being bold enough, or you're just kind of sometimes giving up too early. In the early days, I thought it was tremendously motivating and allowed me to develop discipline, systematic approach, to not be afraid to ask difficult questions or to try novel experimental designs that are not the run of the mill or the traditional way. And I'm really super grateful to that. And I try to give this out to others as well.
I think I would echo many of the things that Iris said. Mentorship and networking are probably the top elements. And I'll speak to that a little bit more. There's a couple other ideas I have, but there's maybe a few tips that might be helpful for the students listening. Obviously when you're like, okay, go network, but what does that mean exactly? Like, how do I do that? I think, Iris said, don't be shy. That's number one. Even if you are shy, you need to be willing to cold email a person and look up their email on the web and say, dear Dr. So-and-so, I am really interested in your work for XYZ reasons. I'm a student. I'm interested in learning whatever. Do you have time for 15 minutes on Zoom? These days, Zoom is available, so you can talk to a lot more people. But back when I was doing this, I would propose a coffee or something that I made the bar as low as possible. And I said, I know you're busy. I can be flexible to your schedule. And so doing the reach out, being explicit about why they're somebody who's interesting to you, being explicit about what you want from the conversation, I think are all great ways to get your foot in the door to have the conversation. And then once you get there and you have whatever conversation that you have, on the other side of that, there's two things that I always recommend when you're learning how to network and building that skill. One is always thanking the person after the meeting, via email, send them a thank you. I think that goes a long way to just refresh you in their mind, especially if that's a person that might downstream become a mentor to you. And two is asking them, are there any other people that would be helpful for me to talk to about XYZ, whatever things you're talking about? And for me, that was really the way that I had such an expansive network built during the end of my PhD when I was really exploring different career options. Was I would ask at the end, is there anyone else I should talk to? And almost always there'd be at least one other person that they would then introduce me to via email. Hey, Bob, meet Daisy. She's a student here doing this, wants to know that. And that's even easier to then get an actual meeting with because you have an introduction from a mutual connection. So that's also something that when I speak to students who are interested in learning about my career journey or reaching out to me for mentorship, that's something that I always am thinking about of, okay, who else do I know who could add another perspective here for this person so that they can continue to learn. So I think those are just a couple of practical tips on how to go about that if it's a new activity for you. And then another piece that I'll say relating to the mentorship that I thought a lot about from my PhD onward is that each person who you're getting advice from or mentorship from, they have their own lens. And I think it's important to understand and at least think about what lens they're using when they talk to you. And especially in academia, I think it's definitely different now than when I was in my PhD and when Iris was in her studies as well. I had an experience of a little bit of rigidity around leaving academia. There were a lot of people who felt like that was bad for a wide variety of reasons. There's people that are like, oh, you're going to waste all this education or whatever reasons that they have. I think now that's changed a lot. And there's a recognition that one, there's not a gazillion faculty positions. So it's just not reasonable for every PhD student to go the academic route. But two, there's a lot of incredible ways that we can utilize the skills that we've learned during our PhD and the technical knowledge that we've gained during our PhD. So I think the avenues are growing and being more supported. And the reason I bring this up is because if you're speaking to somebody who has that lens of academia is best, or even industry is best, you have to kind of take with a grain of salt what they're saying and understand how their lens applies to your actual goals. I think this will also link into when we talk a little bit about sex and gender and how that influences experiences, being really clear on who you are and what you're looking for, even if you don't know what exactly you want. I think you're going to have to root into that to know the right path forward for you. Hopefully that's not totally nebulous advice, but the other couple of tips that I have beyond networking and mentorship are, depending on what university you're at, you might look into whether they have a business program and if you'd be able to enroll in any programs or classes there. So I was at Harvard for my PhD. They actually have at Harvard Business School a program called BEST, B-E-S-T, Business Education for Scholars and Teachers. It's an accelerated business curriculum for their PhD students who are PhDs in the business program. And they actually opened that up for a small number of students across the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. So I applied and got into that and was able to use that as a way to build a little bit of my vocabulary, understand more of what I didn't understand, which is always the most helpful thing to know. And I think between that and clubs, like consulting clubs or business clubs at universities, those are great ways just to, I think, understand more of the landscape. And also, you get to meet other people with similar interests who might give you other tips or tools or contacts that will help you in your own journey. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you're in a PhD program, maybe this is too late, but I know that many programs these days have sub-programs within them that are topic specific. So, at Harvard, I was part of the Leader Human Biology and Translational Research program, which was a sub-program of the Biological and Biomedical Sciences program, which is my degree granting program. And that gave me a deeper curriculum around translation and sort of clinical science. And as I mentioned before, I was too squeamish to do the MD, but this was like the next best thing. I got to interact with patients and doctors and learn pathology. So I think these days, many more programs are getting really creative with their offerings to students. And if you speak to a program administrator or the career office at your university, which I highly recommend, they usually are a great resource that can help identify some of the places that you can just expand the way that you're thinking about how you're learning and exploring. And the last thing I'll say is just that I don't think you need to know what you want exactly. And when I was doing my networking push in my late PhD years, and even in my postdoc, and even after my postdoc, I spent a year and a half before I took another full-time job because I just wasn't sure what I wanted. And I think it's okay to not know, and it's okay to tell people you don't know, as long as you are clear that you're taking action to learn and find out how you can really grow into the career that you're building for yourself.
Great. I'm hearing so many fantastic tangible action items, whether it be mentorship, networking, taking advantage of the academic programs that are available to you, or maybe programs that you're currently in. And Daisy, you mentioned this concept of a lens where everyone has a different path, and to account for who they are and their journey when you are having these networking conversations. And I think that's a great segue into talking about challenges. Now, everyone whatever their goals are, whatever their identity is, everyone has a different set of challenges that they may face in their careers. And at RFS, we want to highlight women in science and what is the experience like as far as being a non-male in these fields. So this could be a great pivot into a chance for you both to talk about the challenges that you face as women in these fields, and what are some advice that you would give to other women who are interested in making this pivot from academia to industry.
So I think that there are two types of challenges that I categorize in my head in this context. One is kind of the, if I can say, objective. I've had 4 kids, and all of them during my career so that's a kind of objective challenge. A year nursing each, and traveling very extensively for work. Child number 3 was basically while I was working right after, I don't remember exactly how long, but I didn't have a maternity leave. So pretty shortly after, wow. Yes, because I moved a lot, I never actually got one. So I would fly to Indianapolis for sometimes 2 weeks a month. And so it was very challenging. I'm very fortunate to, first and foremost, have married a wonderful man who actually I met in med school. So from the very early beginning, it was very obvious to, in my search for my other half, to reflect what my ambitions in life and how I see the world and us growing together. And he's also an entrepreneur and does carries a crazy biotech life of his own, and we support each other and we complement each other, and so that was very. That was critical. So be very strategic, not only about your own career, but kind of how you're building the life that supports that journey. And obviously the way that you want to be supported, you want to be supportive to the other side. So I really think that's a major strategic element. And so this is kind of the objective part, and logistically we found the solutions that work for us. I'm sure every woman finds the right solution for her, and just be whole with it. I've received plenty of remarks and all kinds of opinions about whether or not my kids are being taken care of. I'm whole with the way I raise them, and I'm very fortunate for wonderful kids. But it's not for everyone. Everybody has their own path. In terms of the other element, which is basically the environment, how how you are perceived and accepted in each environment that you find yourself in or steer yourself into. I've been very, very fortunate. I do not, in my experience, I did not experience any deprivation, any issues that are associated with my sex. I believe that I received fair opportunities, but I also worked very hard and very conscientiously to advocate for myself, and that I, something that I tell all my mentees, men and women, but particularly women, you have to advocate for yourself. You cannot expect that the other side will give you, extra, attention or a special treatment. And frankly, I'd want a merit-based environment. And so I believe in role modeling that, both for, my reports, my kids, and the people around me. So I find it actually infectious when peers see that this is the way that I handle or set the stage and the criteria for. So I think it takes work, probably for women. We feel so. I think we hear the term imposter syndrome so often, and we assume it is almost expected of women to live there. But to be honest, every mentee I have, or actually peers that are male, have just the same type of fears and concerns. They are just more fortunate to not wear their heart on their sleeves the way that we do. And I do find myself still working hard on not being so quick to reflect my emotions. On the other hand, I also believe that transparency and honesty are the number one elements to any relationship. And so if this is my greatest fault, I'm happy to live with it. But I think it's important to reflect that to junior women, so that they feel confident. Okay, so I'm this is who I am. These are, I do wear my emotions. It's okay. It doesn't mean that with that stops my opportunity for growth. I do need to find ways to control it so it doesn't, or to manage it so it is not reflected as a weakness, because it does. It is very difficult to manage stakeholders when when the speaker is shaky, or shows signs that are otherwise reflected as weakness. And so it's not for nothing. You do not jump from PhD to CEO in a day. We need to grow and mature and find our own style, and find the right environment that is good for us. And that's okay too. Not every environment will be the one that necessarily is the best for you, and you might need to change your perception actually of what is where you're going to flourish, and be happy with that. So a lot of this is mental work.
I completely agree that environment is so important. I think from my perspective, having alignment internally and externally is what's going to allow you to flourish. And a lot of my journey was trying to find that. Really, I felt discordance between what I felt inside and what I was experiencing outside. And I have plenty of small, somewhat inconsequential anecdotes of comments or remarks or strange things that were said to me from well-meaning mentors or colleagues or even peers that I registered as being relating to me as a woman that wouldn't have occurred had I been a man. But again, I think I also, I had lots of opportunities. I don't feel like I was deprived of opportunities. I think that I had to be very opportunistic with those opportunities and persevere through some uncomfortable conversations, some uncomfortable environments to get to where I now am. But I think ultimately, one of the things that I learned along the way, when I would get certain feedback like, oh, you should smile more when you're presenting, or, oh, that dress is inappropriate, people won't take you seriously, things like that, which really just irked me. And, I think there's many ways to receive comments like that. One is to implement the advice that you're given and, kind of conform to the standard of that environment. For me, I wasn't comfortable with that. I didn't like that standard. I didn't appreciate that advice. I understood it came generally from a well-meaning place. I wasn't like horribly offended or anything. I know that the people who said those things to me really wanted the best for me and wanted me to have all the opportunities that could be available to me. And what I decided, that those things happened to me in my PhD years. And what I decided then was, I don't want or need to be in the rooms where those are the requirements for me to succeed. And that's allowed me to come into my own and be really confident in what I bring to the table, and knowing that there are people out there who will accept that, and they'll know that the work that I do and the quality of that work will speak for itself, and that will allow me to rise. So, I think both Iris and I have this experience of you're a hard worker, you're a great worker, and like that will prevail if you doggedly pursue things that you care about and you do great work and you're rigorous with the work that you do, and you surround yourself with people that recognize that in you. And I think that last bit is really one of the most critical elements of having supporters around you at varying levels, peers, colleagues, mentors, all the way up, that recognize the great work that you do and will help you ascend to wherever you're trying to go. I think sometimes questions like these and even conversations like these, we talked a lot about this in my PhD program of like how women had different experiences, women in science had different experiences. And I even think that inherent in these conversations and in this kind of question sort of reinforces this paradigm when we can reframe it as, what are ways that I can center myself and act from a place of, I know who I am and what my values are, and I will find the resources and the people and the environments that support that. And these days, I think we're lucky that there are lots of opportunities for people of all stripes, of all genders, to be able to find that success. And it may not be as, expansive as if you're a cis white male necessarily, but I think that there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room for all of us, as long as you're doing great work and advocating for yourself. That's the other piece that Iris mentioned that I think couldn't be more important, is knowing that your voice matters. And again, finding the people who want to listen to that voice. And they're out there. There's a bunch of them are in this room right now. I'm one of them. And we're here to open doors and windows and help find the way for people that are willing to do great work and willing to show up as who they are and bringing that into the work that they do. And I think I think there are challenges for any person, no matter who you are. They're going to look different. And at the end of the day, it comes down to really understanding yourself well enough and maturing, whether that's, regulating your emotions, which I think is, of course, important for both men and women in a professional environment, understanding the etiquette of the different environments you go into. If I was working in finance, it would probably be really different than working in a small biotech, in the way that I dress and the way that I act. It's just, there's cultures that are sort of micro to the space that you move into. Certainly working at a pharmaceutical company is a bit more formal than where I work too. So I would have to dress differently. And I think that's a thing we think a lot about when we talk about women in different spaces is, okay, how are you dressing? How are you talking? How are you acting? How are you emoting? It's also an environmental match, and being clear about your priorities. Is it more important for you to fully express who you are and find an environment that allows for that? Or is it more important for you to do this type of work and you don't actually mind having a more structured way that you show up in work to do that work? And I think it's any avenue is fine. You just have to know what's right for you and pursue that. And that's agnostic to what you do. That's true if you stay in academia, anywhere that you want to work, you should be surrounded by people that support the type of environment that you need. And you need to seek that out and also be clear on what that is for you.
All right. This idea of an environmental fit, I think, is so crucial. And another thing that came to mind for me as well is, I think, Daisy, you mentioned this term of conforming. Do we want to conform to certain environments that honestly may be sexist or are sexist when we are talking about comments such as you should smile more, or comments about appearance or what's appropriate clothing to wear? These comments are essentially not welcoming to people who are non-male. And with that, I think another important topic to ask is, as women, we can do the work of finding these environments that fit and advocating for ourselves. But at the same time, these systems are unequal. So what are ways in which the industries can better uplift women and make it so that we no longer have these systemic issues that are making these challenges really impeding the career trajectory of women because of sexism? So I guess the question there is, how can industries improve? How can people better support women in terms of their career goals and also tackle the sexism that exists?
I have one thought to that that comes to mind immediately, which is I very much believe in the if you can see it, you can be it kind of premise of if there's more visibility to women in positions of leadership and positions across industry, that's extremely helpful to make it feel welcoming to other women or non-male people. And that's true. I mean, it's not just women, it's minorities, it's, people with different gender orientation, sexual orientation. I think it's really important that we have diversity in leadership. And so I know there's initiatives in place to get more diversity on boards and more diversity in C-suites. And, I'm a small biotech company, so I don't have a solution to that kind of problem at the infrastructure level that you're asking, but it's something that I do think about as we grow Oviva, is who are the team that we're bringing in, and are they reflecting our values, which do include diversity and inclusion and inviting diverse perspectives and engaging in dialogue with the people that are part of our team and the communities that we're trying to serve. I think those are all elements that feel really important in making it more welcoming, and that any organization can start at any time of recruiting people like that and creating space for them to exist.
Again, this time I'm going to double click and completely echo what Daisy says. We want, again, to balance between two things. One is diversity, and the other is respect. And I think that as long as it's very clear and we live our values, and whether it's small biotech or big company, we live our values that, we balance these two. We allow for people that allow, we celebrate basically people's unique dress or any other decoration, and expression approaches, as long as, it is respectful to other people. Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, from my own perspective, the type of comments that I've seen around are in terms of for men and for women, where we're more around the respect. Men are not welcome to come in, open shirts and, letting everything out. That's not acceptable either. And they get, comments as well. And I think that in both cases, there's a way to explain and mentor and support so that it's respectful. But we should have a set of, as you mentioned, Daisy, environment appropriate kind of dress codes, because at the end of the day, we are very, very, very much focused on the merit and the robustness and the work that we do. And I think it would be a shame if we give too much, attention to how people dress, and so it's just not our values, right? Our values are to really push for therapeutics for patients. this is such a higher, it just eclipses everything else. And I think that if we all remember, what we're here for, what we're trying to do, and that we're really trying to support each other in getting to that goal, I think also the sensitivities around some of these comments would probably be a little bit more tolerated. I think, Daisy, you said a very insightful comment, that you understand that some of the comments you received back when came from good intentions. And so again, let's remember, people trying to help each other do really good things, really important things for the world. And I believe that each environment finds its own code of how to behave, right? It's not just how we dress or it's how we behave. And it's respect at the basis.
Thank you, Iris and Daisy, for sharing your insights with us. This brings us to the end of this session, from PhD to CEO. My name is Fay Lin, Senior Editor of Gen Biotechnology. Thank you for tuning into this session of the Rosalind Franklin Society 2022 year-end event. We hope you enjoy the rest of the program.